right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, home run. Don Mattingly. Tuck waits one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here. He's gone. And the
Welcome back to another episode of Table Setters, covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined my tag team partner, Devin. What's up, dude?
What's going on, man? It's a February officially, which kind of feels like baseball eve to me. Spring training around the corner and college baseball right around the corner. You can kind of taste it. It's almost here.
So no warming up the bullpen today. We're excited to welcome in Ben Upton, co-founder and the host of 11.7, the go-to podcast for all things college baseball. 11.7 has become a must-listen for fans of the sport, providing in-depth analysis, interviews, and a unique perspective on the college baseball landscape. We know his passion for the game has helped grow the college baseball community, and he's here to share some insights and teach us some things. You can follow him on X at Ben_Upton5. Thanks for joining us, Ben. How are you tonight?
That was an unbelievable intro. Did you write that, or is that something that we wrote and you found it online? Like, that was perfect.
Well, that's all me, dude, because we've been looking to get some college insight, and you are a de facto source. We found you. Well, Devin actually found you on Twitter and been following you since, and we've been trying to get you on, and you've been my source for all things college baseball, so we appreciate all that you do over there.
Yeah, I appreciate it a lot. And when Devin reached out on Twitter, I don't know if I was following you guys or not, but I saw a DM request, and obviously I like to look at just baseball pages in general. Like, I'm a big Major League Baseball fan. Unfortunately, an Astros fan, where I'm sure there might be some jokes thrown my way. But anyways, I was checking out your stuff and listened to one pod, and then I pulled up your YouTube page and started seeing what you guys were doing. I was like, man, these guys are really good. So yeah, happy to be here. And if this turns into a monthly thing or a weekly thing or whatever, I'm happy to come back whenever.
That would be awesome, and I like that idea. Before we dig into everything that's coming up with the college baseball season, just give us a little background for any of our listeners that maybe aren't familiar about 11.7, how it got started, what you guys are doing now. Just a little bit about you guys.
How much time do you have? Because it's a long back.
Go ahead. We want to hear it.
Okay, so I got done playing like mid-major Division I baseball in 2017, and it was kind of at a point where college baseball was starting to become a little bit more popular. The SEC dominance was started pretty much around that 2014 to 17 era, and so the SEC and the ACC were getting a ton of exposure, and even the Pac-12 back then was a powerhouse conference. And I always thought, it was like, man, it would be cool if there was a place where, you know, the G5 schools and the mid-major schools got some love, and, you know, there's some coverage out there, because these guys are all really good baseball players, and they all have their own stories, and the coaches have their own stories and their own paths. So I was like, when I get done playing, I'm going to start something on social media and just see where it takes me. And so I graduated in 17. The whole 2018 year, I was actually working to help start up a team. It was a sister team of the Savannah Bananas. I got hired on to work. I was the first employee of the Macon Bacon, which is in the same city, Macon, Georgia, where Mercer University is, where I played. So I spent the whole year doing sales and marketing for the Macon Bacon, and kind of was still intertwined in the college game. I was doing ESPN Plus broadcasting for the Mercer home games, and the Macon Bacon were a collegiate summer league team in the Coastal Plains League. So I was still connected with like college players and coaches and stuff in that realm. But then in 2019, it was like maybe January 17th or January 16th, I decided, I was like, you know what? Like, I'm just going to start a college baseball podcast. Like, my best friend from back home, he's been my best friend since I was 8 years old. He played mid-major college baseball too. Like, let's go ahead and just start this podcast and just, you know, kind of shoot around with the boys and interview some players. And I remember the first episode of the podcast, before we even had social media pages or website or anything, we posted the podcast and it got like 21 views or listens. And I was like, oh, that's sick. That's like a high school sized classroom of kids. Like, listening to us talk. And I kind of got obsessed with it and just wanted to continue to grow it. We built a Twitter page and an Instagram and then a website. And it just kind of has grown ever since 2019. Started getting guests on, and we did like mid-major top 25, which we were the first to do that. And I don't know, it's just kind of led me the last, let's see, this will be season 7, year 6 for us. We still enjoy doing it, and we'd love to see where the game of college baseball is at right now. It's in such a good place with so much momentum.
So with a lot of the things with college baseball, they were in the news today with the big surprise that MLB The Show 25 is the trailer, the inclusion of some of the college teams. So UCLA, TCU, Texas, Vanderbilt, Tennessee, all those teams in there. And also looks like Road to the Show will now begin in a player's amateur career using metal bats in high school and transitioning to college baseball. What are your thoughts on this, and how big of a deal is for college baseball to get this kind of rep in a game like MLB The Show?
Yeah, this is big time. Obviously, when the news came out, there were leaks of this possibly coming last year when at like Alex Box Stadium and a few bigger college baseball venues, they had MLB The Show advertising like on the backstops and on the ESPN Plus streams. So it was like, okay, MLB, or at least MLB The Show is wanting to invest some into college baseball. And then when they came out this year with the video and the screenshots that everybody saw on social media today, it was like, okay, this is a good step in the right direction because we have officially licensed logos. We have not Rosenblatt, sorry, Charles Schwab Field in Omaha, as a stadium choice there. It was cool to see. So I hope this is the first step in ultimately getting us a college baseball video game back, which I don't know about you guys. I spent so much time on that video game growing up in elementary and middle school.
I mean, maybe it will head back. I almost, it seems like a test for like what kind of popularity that part of the game gains. I mean, even the college football game, I spent so much time when I was in college playing NCAA football, and that disappeared forever. And there was just all this demand to bring it back, and now we finally have it back. So who knows? We're going to spend, I think, the majority of our time tonight talking to you about the upcoming season, but I do want to look back just quickly at last season, specifically at the draft and some of the guys that were taken specifically out of college, because that's what we're talking about tonight. So two-part question here. If you look at everyone who was taken, is there someone that you believe, just one player, maybe there's more, but if there's one you had to pick that you could think could be a perennial all-star in Major League Baseball down the road, who would that be? And then I have a follow-up for you after that one.
Right. Great question. I think over the last 2 seasons, we've been spoiled with elite college talent, like pretty much going to make the jump directly to the big leagues after a few months, as we saw with like Paul Skeens, Jack Wilson, and some of those guys from the 2023 draft class. Last year's draft class was probably more balanced, but just loaded with so much potential. I'll tell you, like my favorite pitcher in that draft was Hagen Smith by far. I think he has the stuff and the durability to get people out in the major league level right now, and might be the next 5 to 7 time All-Star in Major League Baseball. So I like him a lot. I think his stuff plays, and he was just embarrassing hitters similar to Paul Skeens in the SEC this past year. I hope and pray that Cam Smith from Florida State ends up being a multi-year All-Star because he's on the Astros now with the Kyle Tucker trade. But I always thought he was somebody that came into college at Florida State, true freshman, just raw potential. And not only was he voted like team captain last year for Florida State, he was the #1 locker room guy. And every scout and every front office member fell in love with him and his personality and his like desire to win. And then sure enough, he grew into his body and it was hitting balls 450 feet to the opposite field. Freak athlete. I think he's somebody that can play multiple positions at the major league level. And I'm just hoping and praying he's the next Alex Bregman or the next Lance Berkman of the Houston Astros. Just a guy that was a stud in college and translated it to the major leagues.
And then the follow-up would be, is there someone maybe lesser known or taken rounds later that you could see as a college baseball fan? Maybe someone that's not well known to the casual MLB fan, but that you would expect somewhere down the road is going to make a big impression.
Yeah, there's a few. Bryce, I'm pretty sure his first name is Bryson. I think his name's Bryson Ware. He played at Auburn last year as a shortstop, and he ended up getting drafted like maybe the 10th round or the 8th round. But he is somebody that I think is like possibly the next. Let me try to find a player comp for him here. I can't think of it, but just somebody that's going to play every day at the major league, like a JJ Hardy almost for the
Okay.
Brewers back in the day.
Yeah.
He's got pop. He makes the routine play look super easy, and is somebody that always had his jersey just dirty as could be. So I think his first name was Bryson. I'm blanking on it, but last name Ware from Auburn last year was a stud. I think he was a 2020 guy, 20 homers, 20 stolen bases
Mm.
last year at Auburn.
And the thing about the college, following college, and Devin and I were talking about this, just trying to shorten the pipeline because we watch the interest in the NFL. It happens on a 12-month calendar, and I think if we can do that for baseball and have the draft continue to be this event, and I think it has to do with gaining interest in the game and the shortened timeline. We watched a player like Paul Skeens, as you mentioned before, make it to the majors so soon, and I think that's an exciting thing for baseball fans to see it turn around so quickly. Because in the past, it used to be you draft a guy and you wait 5 years for them to toil in the minors, and then eventually they make it up.
Yeah, and you mentioned shortening the pipeline. I think that's exactly what's happening right now because you rewind back 30 years. If you 30 years ago, 25 years ago, if you played college baseball, it just meant like you weren't good enough to get drafted out of high school.
Mm.
And like those kids that were drafted out of high school, they would spend the 3 to 5 years in the minor leagues and then be up eventually. But what we've seen, over the last pretty much since COVID is, hey, if you're good enough and you're able to compete, you might spend a month in Double A and then go straight to the big leagues. The Angels have been really making that popular with Zach Neto and Nolan Shanwell. I think they're going to do the same thing with Christian Moore this year. They
Yeah.
drafted
Yeah.
8th overall. The White Sox have done it with Garrett Crochet. I think he went straight from the pitching in the SEC to the COVID shortened. What was it, 2020? The COVID shortened year. I think he was pitching in the
Yep.
playoffs for the White Sox that year. Anyways, I think the pipeline's getting a lot shorter just because these guys are choosing to play college baseball, and I think colleges now are developing guys and investing more into the players than minor league baseball is, with nutrition plans and former minor league instructors and coaches now coaching at the college level. They're getting these guys ready to go quickly.
And a big conversation we continue to have, and similar to, again, comparing it to NCAA football, is just seeing who's next. And so heading into this season, who's the college player that will be a future MLB star from this 2025 draft class in your mind? And the guy we'll be talking about for years to come. I mean, I can look at the top 25 list of players in college that you're looking forward to. A lot of them are from Texas A&M. We'll talk about them in a little bit. But any player that jumps out to you for a 2025 draft class that people could be seeing very shortly in a major league uniform?
Yeah, I mean, Jace Lavili. I have the yip saying his last name. If you guys listen to my podcast, you'll know. I call him Jace La Purplish because it's La Violet. So Violet's kind of purplish, but it's pronounced Laviolette.
Laviolette. Sounds like a hockey player.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
sounds like a
the-
hockey player, but talk about somebody. He's 6'6", 240, plays center field, runs like a deer. 50 career collegiate home runs. He hit 29 last year, 21 as a true freshman. He's almost got a Matt Olson type swing, where if you put anything like low and in, middle in, like he turns on it and just with such beauty, and the ball just smoothly comes off his bat 450 feet. So I think he'll end up being probably the #1 overall pick this year if he stays healthy. He's on the best team. He's the best player on the best team. Usually results in a lot of success there. Did you also say you wanted like an under the radar guy that maybe could pop off, or did I make that up?
No,
We'll
I would
take that.
definitely, yeah, we'll definitely take that for sure. Cause we have definitely fantasy baseball people in mind that like to have those names to keep in mind for a couple of years,
Down the
Yeah,
road.
100%. I'll tell you somebody that I really like, and he's getting a little bit of notoriety now, but he plays at a mid-major school. Tanner Thatch from UNCW hit 28 or 27 homers in a big ballpark at UNC Wilmington last year. And instead of hitting the transfer portal and going to play and probably getting paid $100,000 in NIL at South Carolina or North Carolina or LSU. He decides to stick at UNCW because he loves the culture there. He loved the coaches that believed in him, and he did really well in the Cape this summer. And he's somebody that's going to be like he's almost like a Nolan Shanwell who was at FAU as a junior, gets drafted in the first round, goes straight to the Angels in the big leagues. First baseman, ton of bat control. He's got more power than Shanwell. And I mean, he's somebody that just he looks the part. I mean, he's big, he's physical, still has room to grow, but the bat to ball skills are elite.
So I'm going to be honest, like, and I don't want to speak for Steve, but I think he might be in the same boat here. I want to get more into college baseball, specifically this season. It's not that I am a complete novice and know nothing about it, but I can't say I've followed a season from bell to bell. And the last couple of seasons, I've taken more interest in specific players. Like a couple of years ago, I'm watching Paul Skeens and Dylan Cruz at LSU, or Rhett Lauder at Wake Forest. Last year, guys like Charlie Condon and Travis Pisani, you couldn't miss them. Even if you're not watching college baseball constantly, if you're on social media, you're going to see a ton about them. For me, part of it, being up here in New York, we don't necessarily have a powerhouse school that people follow. I'm a University of Delaware person a long time ago. You know, they have a baseball team there, but at least when I was there, that wasn't the big thing there. So I think part of it's I just don't have a team to follow, and I feel strange as an adult just pledging my allegiance somewhere random. I guess that could be a thing. But I want you to sell the game to us, to someone like me who is a huge baseball fan and is just trying to get more into the college game specifically from a whole season standpoint of following it all year. How would you sell it? What is what are the things that you love most about it?
Well, you're on the right track with I think a lot of people start off liking college baseball because they're obsessed with the prospects and
Mhm.
they see the clips that go viral on social media of Tommy White hitting 9 home runs in his first 8 games, or Drew Burris having a 4 home run game the opening weekend of his freshman year. And you start following those guys throughout their collegiate career because it's not like the NBA where you can be one and done. Once you're playing Division I baseball, you're there until you either turn 21 or you play 3 full seasons. So you can kind of follow, starting with year one. If you find a couple freshmen that you like or some sophomores, you can follow them for 3 years at the same school for the most part. Now, the reason why I always liked college baseball was credit to my dad. He was always a college baseball guy first. So growing up, I lived 25, 30 minutes from Minute Maid Park for the Astros, and I also lived 25, 30 minutes from Reckling Park for Rice University, and about 30 to 35 minutes from the University of Houston. And it was always, hey, if Rice is in town or if the University of Houston's in town, we're going to go to these games instead. And comparing it to like going to an Astros game and sitting way up high, I could. I'm a diehard Astros fan on TV, right? Like as a kid, I'm watching every game at 7:05 and being a diehard fan. But it got to the point where I would never ask him to go to Astros games. Like I didn't. I know my dad didn't like to pay to park, and he didn't like the expensive concession stands and the expensive tickets. We would go down to like Rice games, and it was free to park, $5 tickets, and dollar hot dogs every day. So going to these games 15, 20 times a year was fun to me. And now being an adult and I have a 2-year-old son, I like the aspect that no game is ever out of reach. Like
Mm.
we have sometimes like 5 errors in an inning, or a guy can't find the zone on the mound and he's the last guy out of the bullpen left, so he's got to finish the game and he just can't. So no lead is safe. And I think the kids just have more passion and more team, like their goal is to win as a team. Something that I was taught by, I think it was actually one of our first interviews at 11.7. I don't know if I want to give him credit or not, but anyway, somebody came on our podcast and said for Division I baseball players, that's the most meaningful baseball those guys will play until they make it to the major leagues. Because even if you get drafted and you play high A, double A, triple A, you're not out there to win games. You're out there to like try to make it to the big leagues, produce your numbers to get to the big leagues. And even in the major leagues, it's not really about winning games until, the postseason or at least September. You're still out there for yourself to try to get a bigger and better contract. So I don't know. I think it's a team game. These guys want to win, and they've put in 6 to 8 months of the offseason to get to that point in the season. So it's fun.
So we talked about Jace Laviolette and Texas A&M, and I would consider them the big dog looking at the rankings, and LSU being at number 2. How distant of a number 2 is LSU to Texas A&M as we sit preseason ready for the season to kick off? And is there any other team that is a threat to what Texas A&M is trying to accomplish this year?
Yeah, look, Texas A&M on paper, I think they're the best team in the country. Now they have some question marks. How is Michael Early going to adjust as a head coach? Never been a head coach before. Now he gets the keys to the Lamborghini, and even though it was, the players and the Texas A&M administration that wanted him to have the keys, it's still like an extra step. Now, I love Coach Early. He was, I think, our second or third guest ever on the 11.7 podcast in 2019 when he was the hitting coach. He might have been the volunteer assistant, but maybe hitting coach at Arizona State at the time. And he was one of our first Twitter follows. We followed him back and sent him a DM, and he's like, "Yep, would love to come on the show." And so we've stayed in touch ever since. And like, just an unbelievable human being, even like one of the best baseball minds in the game. So I think he'll do well. And with the talent that he has, it's hard to do poorly. But I'll give you a team that I actually think on paper stacks up better than LSU. Now, I also think LSU is uber talented and have some guys that are in the Golden Spikes category with, like, I don't know, we can go down that list here in a second, but I like Virginia. I think the Virginia Cavaliers, not only have they been to Omaha like 3 times in the last 4 years, but they also return a ton from last year's Omaha team and possibly the best starting rotation in the country. So I don't know where they're ranked in D1 baseball. I imagine probably top 5. I haven't looked, but
They're 5 as of
Virginia,
the 27th of January. So they're 5 as we speak.
5. Wow, that's shocking because the team they had last year was good, but I think they got better this year. And people forget over the last 10 years of the last 10 college baseball seasons, I think Virginia has the best resume. They have a national championship. They've been to Omaha 4 times, maybe 5 times in those 10 years, and they win the ACC and host regionals almost every year.
So we actually had this question planned for later, and it just makes a lot more sense right here. You mentioned the Texas A&M manager situation. So last year, and I've even seen this come up again, clips of this recently as college baseball approaches. I might be butchering this name here, but Jim Schlossnagle. Is that
Schlossnagle.
Schlossnagle? Like, that's a tough one as well. So he was in a press conference, basically being adamant, saying he took the Texas A&M job because that's where he wanted to be for the rest of his career, and then literally 24 hours later or less, took the Texas job. Can you give us a little background on that whole situation from last season?
Yeah, I'm gonna try not to say too much, not because like I'm trying to show off that I know more, but I have a pretty good connection not only to Texas but also Texas A&M. So I think there
Mm.
was some more behind the scenes that I will believe. But ultimately, Jim Schlossnagle is like he is almost who's the best college football coach that has never won a national championship? Like you
Mm.
guys can probably help me out better. I don't know much about college football, but he like somebody along the lines of, hmm, I don't know. We can skip that point, but ultimately, he is one of the best college baseball coaches in the country, hands down. Like some would even probably rank him number 1, and definitely number 1 for somebody who's never won a national championship. He took TCU back in the or like really mid 2000s from a nobody to a College World Series participant every single year, and they never got it done in Omaha, but would finish 4th or would finish 6th. And at the time, TCU was in the WAC and not very baseball funded, and turned them into one of the best, nicest facilities in college baseball with a diehard fan base. and built him up from nothing. Well, he leaves TCU in a contract year to go to Texas A&M because I think it was the same AD at Texas A&M made the move and like offered him a bunch of money, and A&M was struggling down in the SEC, and it took 2 years, or actually his first year he did really well, hosted a regional when nobody expected him to, and then had like kind of a down year, and then ultimately led him to a runner-up last year, runner-up finish in the College World Series. Well, the AD left, or like his original friend, best friend AD signed on at Texas. They had some behind the scenes meetings and ultimately was offered a job he couldn't refuse at Texas. So, of course, there was some drama, not only because those two teams are just hated rivals, but the A&M fan base thought that he was checked out and turned his back on the team while they were still playing for a national championship in the middle of that 3-game national championship series. So, long story short, he I think he made the best decision for himself because he felt more comfortable under the athletic director at Texas than he did the new athletic director at Texas A&M. Um, and also Texas threw him, I think, twice as much money, which when you get into the millions, twice as much goes a long ways. So I don't fault him for leaving. I fault him for that press conference that you mentioned earlier. I think he and the players had no idea about any of this either. Some of them left and followed him to Texas in the transfer portal, but a lot of them decided to stay at A&M under Coach Mike Early. So that should tell you a lot about how the players felt.
So I want to also get a little bit into the ranking and the ranking system. We kind of mentioned the top 25 a little bit ago and highlighted a couple teams there. I know college football over the last 10 to 20 years that they've really tweaked different things in their rankings and obviously their playoff system. As far as college baseball, someone trying to get into it, if they're looking at the top 25, first of all, is there a specific place they should be looking? How is that formulated? And in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter a whole lot?
I have some opinions about the ranking system. So in football and like even in college basketball, there's pretty good formulas that can take, what has been done on the field and what has, the numbers behind it and strength of schedule and everything, and determine who is the best, like the top 64 teams or the top 12 teams. Computers are pretty good and accurate on it. With baseball, you're playing 3-game weekend series that, in my opinion, matter more than the midweek. A midweek game is a Tuesday or Wednesday game that everybody plays, but for the most part, don't mean as much, especially to the bigger schools. So it's like at the end of the year, the records bleed together, and there is an RPI formula that typically favors the bigger conference schools like the SEC and the ACC. And then as far as like a ranking system to put out to the public, there's probably 3 or 4 main ranking systems. You got D1 baseball, you got the coaches poll, and you have Baseball America, and then like the National Collegiate Baseball Writers Association. Like those 4 all come out with recognized polls across the NCAA, but they're all, and this is what I hate about them. They all stem from the preseason rankings before we see anybody play baseball. So if you're the number 8 team in the country and then you lose 2 out of 3 to Northeastern University opening weekend, you fall to like 14th. And like you hold that 14th place to the next week, and if you win, you move up to 12. So at the end of the year, your rankings in May are still kind of formulated based off of the preseason rankings, because if you're unranked to start the season and you win your first 10 games, like you're at 21 or 22 in the rankings for D1 baseball and Baseball America and all these ranking systems, like you don't get credit for actually playing the games and beating good teams. Like you have to work your way in. It's annoying to me, but it doesn't matter.
And it's just different too because of the structure of the season, as you mentioned, with college football being the regular season games being segmented, but with college baseball, a much longer season, much longer schedule. And I feel like by the time you get to the College World Series in June, it's just like it feels like the rankings are not as accurate as they probably should be, right? So I just think maybe it's for more of the vanity of it, or just for the fans are used to that structure. But you're right, maybe there needs to be some tweaking.
Yeah, I don't know how to fix it either, so I'm not the right guy to ask. I just needed to complain about something.
I mean, I can relate. Even I'm a Notre Dame fan, but my dad and I every year talk about football. Like, they'll start the season in the top 5 and then lose to some small school like they did this year. And it's like we knew these guys were overrated. It's just because of that, prestige they have. And I know they made it all the way to the final game, but every year that seems to happen. So that's in college football too, because you're right. If you start higher up, even if you have some bumps in the road, you're more likely to be there in the end. So I could see that
Yeah,
argument for sure.
but I mean, baseball is still like such
So
a
we talked about
streaky sport. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead. Sorry, my internet got a
Oh,
little laggy right there. So you're all good, Ben.
no, you're good. I was just saying, like, baseball is still like such a streaky sport that for me, like, I would rather be on the team that's unranked going into the regional play and winning 12 straight games versus a team that limped in. They're the 16th overall seed. They get to host a regional, but they've lost 7 of the last 10. It's all about timing in college baseball. Like, are you playing your best baseball in June, or are you playing it in March and April?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the casual fan right now, we discussed them before, and we see a lot of stuff on the Instagram algorithm. You'll see the highlights of the players that we're used to, some of the big programs. And we're most familiar with teams from the Power Four conferences, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, the ACC. But let's talk about the mid majors. Give us a couple programs outside of those power conferences that could make some noise this season and really shock some people with some of the good play that we see on the field.
Yeah, look, my favorite mid-major conference is the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt is a lot of fun to keep up with. And if you're somebody that doesn't have a favorite team in college baseball, but you want one and you want a team to follow and you don't want to seem like a bandwagoner, or you don't want to like just jump to an SEC team or whatever, go to the Sun Belt and find you a team like a Louisiana Lafayette or a Southern Miss, or somebody like that that's good every year, but they don't get quite the notoriety. But then when the tournament comes around, they're in it every season and they're close to making it to Omaha. Like, go pick somebody in the Sun Belt. Like James Madison was fun last year. Like, they had such a fun team, and they were a game away from a super regional. Georgia Southern always just has a bunch of just blue collar guys that just go out there and play just a hard style of baseball. So I love the Sun Belt. And I think the best team in the Sun Belt this year are the Troy Trojans. They had a lot of preseason hype last year, and they struggled down the stretch and like just finished the year really bad. But they returned pretty much everybody, and they also got some like big time talent out of the transfer portal. So I think they're preseason ranked 25th in the country, maybe 22. Can't remember. But like as far as mid majors go, they're probably number 1, 2, or 3 on everybody's board. So, and they have a fun coach, Skylar Mead. He's actually a good friend of mine. He young guy, played in the College World Series for Louisville back in 2007, and has been coaching ever since. So, the Troy Trojans would be a fun team to hop on the bandwagon this year.
As far as consumption of those games, is that I know you mentioned you're doing coverage on ESPN Plus. Can you find all those games on ESPN Plus if you're subscribed? So I always see that there's, even college hockey games. Like I mean, there's so much to consume on ESPN Plus when you have that subscription.
Yeah, it's something like 70% of college baseball games are on ESPN Plus. And I'm
Ooh.
talking Friday afternoon, Army versus Fordham. Like, it'll be a noon game, Army Fordham playing at noon. You can, after that, you'll go to watch Coastal Carolina versus Western Kentucky at 3, and then at 7 you'll turn on Ole Miss versus Mississippi State. ESPN Plus is the best. And you can what's even more fun about ESPN Plus is they have Hawaii home games that start at midnight Eastern time. And Hawaii usually has a really fun non-conference schedule. They'll fly in teams like Ole Miss or NC State or somebody, and they'll play them at midnight Eastern. So if you're up, just have nothing else to do. And a lot of the sports books nowadays, you can gamble on college baseball. So like you'll have a Hawaii versus Ole Miss game, over under is 11.5, and it's at midnight. And if you and your boys are sitting in the garage or at the bar somewhere, you can turn it on and watch the game. So yeah, ESPN Plus will be your best friend. And I know they bumped up the pricing recently. I don't know how much it is now, like maybe $14 a month, but for college baseball, it pays for itself. It's a must have.
So we talked a little bit before about how the whole pipeline from the draft to a Major League Baseball club seems to be getting quicker, and part of that to the college game. And you mentioned a few reasons why, and said that a lot of these college systems are almost better than minor league baseball. Are there certain programs that you see ahead of that curve? Even I know we've talked certain places about pitching labs and almost these professional kind of places that are getting these kids a little bit ahead. And also, obviously, when you're recruiting, those kind of things help. What kind of programs do you see that are a little bit ahead of the game in that way?
Yeah, I would look at the teams that produce the most major league talent because they do have that little extra sauce or the extra like the extra little bit that the other teams don't have. So, the Florida Gators, somebody that they have all the tools, all the bells and whistles to make your players better. Plus, as a staff, a lot of those guys like specialize in player development, which is huge. Everybody knows about Wake Forest and their pitching lab, what Arkansas does with their indoor facilities and their metrics and analytics and data, top of the charts. Now, so I can go on a list of who does it best at the Power Five, but I'll give you guys a few names that maybe don't get the recognition that they deserve for developing guys and making them better. But like Iowa, the Iowa Hawkeyes out of the Big Ten, they were technically the first team with a pitching lab where they took guys that had just raw stuff and helped them shape pitches, help them figure out through video and through analytics and all of the technology that they have how to throw hard and how to throw strikes and make their stuff the best it can be. And they're continuing to do that. Brody Brecht was somebody last year, first round draft pick. He was throwing 101 to 102 miles an hour as a starter. I think he gets picked in the first round, right? Maybe the Mets or somebody took him in the first round. But even though his numbers weren't great at the college level, it was like he came in as a wide receiver on the football team that kind of messed around and played baseball in high school. And then they find out he can throw 97. They turn him into a starting pitcher. Like Iowa does it really good. Kansas is another team that is big into the pitching development stuff. And then I'm trying to think of anybody else that like Coastal Carolina does the best, I think, non-power five with developing hitters, making guys that are probably undersized to play SEC baseball, a little undersized, but teach them how to get 100% power into every swing they take. So that's just another fun team out there.
So Brody Brecht was 38th overall pick by the Colorado Rockies back in 2024. So, and some of the stuff I'm reading about him over here with the 2022 honors of being the freshman All-American, perfect game, second team freshman. So dude's out there. And like you said, he played football and baseball in high school. So some of these athletes are out there doing their thing. We talked a lot about rule changes in baseball, and it's been the conversation among baseball fans all over the place. And MLB and their fan base, I mean, you can say most people have been, if they didn't want the change, they had to get accustomed to it. And we have the pitch timers, the shift restrictions, the bigger bases, all aimed at making the game more appealing to the casual fan. Is there anything you'd like to see at the college baseball level to get the casual fan in? Because as we mentioned, with the NFL and college football, there are a lot of casual fans out there that are just consuming the game. How do we get people to consume college baseball at a casual level? Is that possible, or is it more just a diehard fandom?
Yeah, I mean, there's some things that I think they could do. One of them is like, let's create fantasy baseball, like fantasy college baseball, right? Where you and your buddies can go pick a fantasy league and play each other every single week and accumulate stats and be competitive that way. I think that's probably on the horizon here pretty soon. Now that gambling has become a thing in college baseball a couple of years ago, these sports books, they probably want to get either daily fantasy out there or normal season long fantasy leagues. But the players are good enough to deserve fantasy leagues now. Like you can actually keep up with players and understand who's good and who's not good. As far as like ballpark experiences, I really think that it is just set up perfect to be. It hasn't changed much, but other than teams getting bigger and nicer facilities, it's the perfect place to go. Take your family, or if you just want to hang out with yourself, like go to a ball game. Like they're cheap to get into. It's good talent, and I mean it's fun. It's a good environment.
Do you ever see the metal bat and the wooden bat changing for the fan? Obviously, the bridge between college baseball to eventually major leagues, that's a huge difference that stands out to the fan that you're looking at. That's a big piece of the game that is completely different.
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever change. The only way I could see it changing is if like Major League Baseball invests a bunch of money, because the best way to think about it is wood bats are too expensive to give guys that aren't going to be barreling the ball up every single time, because they're going to break and you're going to have to replace 100 bats a year versus, I mean, sometimes teams will share three metal bats all season. Like they want the metal bats broken in and worn out a little bit because you get a little extra pop that way. Uh, there's very few guys in college baseball that can handle a wood bat even close to like what a double A or triple A player can. Um, and luckily now a lot of them play summer ball, which is wood bat summer ball, whether it's in the Cape Cod or the Coastal Plains League or wherever. Northwoods League is a good one. They'll go play with a wood bat and just kind of get a feel, but it's a really tough transition. So only the best can really make that transition. So I think it would actually hurt the college game if you gave them wood bats, because you'd see 15 broken bats a game. Stats wouldn't be as high, and I don't know. I don't think it'll ever happen.
I mean, you had me at the college fantasy baseball idea. If that ever happens, I'm just thinking of the combination with Major League Baseball fantasy. And I don't know,
Mhm.
you could have two leagues and then take a few of your guys from college up to your big league. There's so many things you could do with that where people
That's
would
a
buy
good
in.
idea. Yeah.
I mean, well, because the dynasty fantasy baseball is so popular now, where that just could, you don't necessarily need to make it one big league, but I'm
Mhm.
seeing it as you have a college fantasy baseball league, a major league fantasy baseball league, and you can take like maybe 5 or 6 players that graduate out of college up
Mhm.
to your big league team if it's a dynasty team. Like there's so many connections there you can make, which I think just that's what's going to make any game more popular, being able to connect it to
Mhm.
the top of the sport, which is the professional league. So I love that. Um, I wanted to talk about you've mentioned the transfer portal, NIL deals as well. So those two things have kind of wreaked havoc, at least in college football. You see some coaches and some very well-known coaches, basketball as well, leaving that you didn't think would leave at the time they're leaving. What kind of changes has that created in baseball? Has it changed the landscape at all, or has it been a little less impactful than it has been in basketball and football?
It has changed the game of college baseball, I think, for more better than bad. And I'll tell you why. So baseball has always been an underfunded sport. Hence the name 11.7, which is what our podcast is named after, was the amount of scholarships that the NCAA allowed total for a 35-man baseball team. So nobody was on full rides. Like everybody was piecing together 25% or 30%. And you're hoping you get a little bit of academic, you qualify for some academic money, or some kind of lottery money that each state allows or whatever. But nobody was on full rides. Everybody's sharing half a scholarship or 25% of one. And so what NIL has really done is, hey, we are Manscaped, the company that is with beards and trimming and all this. Hey, Tommy White, we will pay you $70,000 a year to market our product. And then Tommy White can go back to LSU's coaching staff and say, hey, I don't need a scholarship this year. Like that's going to pay for school. And we can go out and use that money to go bring in more talent. And so schools, even at the mid-major level, every dollar they get for NIL, they can push towards kids, and they can use that money to fill out their like the rest of their tuition. Versus like football and basketball, where all those guys are on full rides and they're getting NIL stuff, and like the NIL money is just going straight into their pockets. And then they're buying these, super nice cars and houses and this and that as 18-year-olds. And you're like, man, I don't know if that's good for them as people, right? Like 18 years old with that much money and not really knowing responsibility, it can get you in trouble. But for baseball, it's been good because those guys are very team minded, and they're like, hey, if I get NIL money or if I get money from the collective that the school put together, we can use that for my scholarship money and then, spread out the scholarships amongst my friends or my peers, which happens a lot. Now they actually just changed the scholarship limit to 34. You can have up to 34 scholarships per team. Now, not, I would say only about 10% of teams have probably about 30 of the 300 Division I teams have the 34 limit. Most of them are still around the 15 to 20 scholarship limit per team. But at least now there's flexibility for those schools that want to give out more scholarships and allow their players to get bigger NIL deals, which could lure them in from the transfer portal. If somebody was at, let's say, Rider University and they have an All-American season, and Tennessee's like, hey, we have $200,000 in NIL money to give you, come transfer here, it's a no-brainer. And like they'll be put on full scholarship too. So I think it's good for the game. Now, there'll be people that will argue the other side and say, well, we can kiss the Cinderella story of the mid-major team making it to Omaha or winning the College World Series like Fresno State did in 2008, Coastal Carolina in 2016. Like we can kiss that goodbye because the good players are going to transfer to the bigger schools and get more money and more scholarship stuff. So there's always that side of the coin.
Yeah, and that conversation is definitely out there. Like you said, it's a huge jump from 11.7 to 34 full scholarships, and it could separate the power teams from the other teams. But that's the catch-22 because we watch college football very popular when name the teams, the Alabamas of the world are good. The ratings are good. Casuals are watching. So there's something to be said about drawing in the fans to watch teams that they love. The LSUs, when they're good, it's good for college baseball, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's not the LSU's or the University of Texas's fault that like other teams can't keep up with them, right? Especially in the baseball world. If you're University of Texas and you're allowed to go up to 34 scholarships and you're also allowed to give NIL money in the transfer portal, like why would they sit back and be like, no, we want to be like the other 270 teams. Like we want to hang back and like, no, like it's not their fault that they have money and resources and a fan base that cares about baseball. Like they're going to have to take full advantage of it. So, I think there'll be some teams, smaller market teams that will catch up eventually that have had, pretty good baseball pass and a good baseball fan base. But for the most part, you're going to see a big separation between those Power Four schools that take baseball seriously and then some schools that just kind of have baseball just to say they have a baseball team.
And we mentioned college football, and we've seen NFL top prospects sit out of bowl games to avoid injury before the draft. Has that happened in college baseball? And would we see potential first-round picks skipping their games, big games, to protect their stock in lieu of maybe they have a really big game coming up?
Nope, that'll never happen. And I'll tell you why. Because I might have mentioned this already on the podcast now that I think about it, but those games in June for regional, super regionals, and College World Series, those are the most important games those kids will ever play until they reach the major league level, postseason race or postseason games. Talk about fans being as loud as can be and, the environments that these kids are in and winning games is the number one priority. That's the peak for a lot of those kids. Maybe 3 kids on each team will reach the major leagues and only 2 of those 3 kids will play in the playoffs or play in meaningful games. So you have 35 guys on the team that all want to win. If your best player says like, "Nah, I'm going to sit this one out for my money," like they would kill him. They would legitimately kill the kid.
See,
So
I
no, it's
love
never
that
happened
answer.
before, and I don't think it'll ever happen.
I'm glad to hear that because that's a huge problem. In my opinion, it's a huge problem in college football when we see that. Like, if you're a fan and you're giving all your time all year or all fall and winter, and then one of your best players is sitting out this bowl game, like it's I don't know, it's almost demeaning to you as a fan, and like you said, definitely to the teammates.
I'll make a
I
good
want to.
comparison for you real quick. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No,
I'll
no,
make a
no.
good.
Go ahead.
So for like the NCAA baseball tournament is very similar to the college football playoff, right? Like all the games mean something and you can win a championship as long as you keep winning. There are a lot of kids that sit out summer ball and wait for the draft. So for example, if your team doesn't make the NCAA regionals where you get, eliminated early, a lot of them have invites to go play in the Cape Cod League and
Mm,
use the wood bat that month before the draft actually happens. And I would say the summer ball is more of bowl game stuff. You'll see the freshmen and sophomores play in it. You won't see a lot of high level draftable juniors or seniors play in it. Now some will play just because they love the game, but they'll sit out summer ball, their draft eligible year, and just wait for the draft that way. That would be more of like the Meineke Car Care Bowl or whatever.
yeah.
They don't need those reps. They don't want to risk their stock value or anything like that.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me.
Mhm.
Thinking again, it's hard not to continue these comparisons to college basketball and college football. Over the years, some of the biggest name coaches in those college sports end up attracting interest in the NBA or the NFL, and we've seen some people make that jump, sometimes successful, sometimes not. As the college baseball game continues to grow and get a bigger spotlight, which I feel like it is, do you see certain guys in the future getting more MLB interest? Because I mean, we think of Pat Murphy, the Brewers manager. He coached in college, right? But didn't necessarily make the jump right from manager to college to MLB. He was a bench coach for Council, I believe, at first. Do you think that happens eventually, where someone goes and gets a huge interest because of the job they're doing in college and goes right to MLB manager?
I would say yes. I would probably argue it would almost work in reverse, though. I think what you're gonna see is more major league managers getting interest level or more interest moving to the college game.
Hmm.
So you take somebody like Craig Counsell, for example. Craig Counsell could be thrown more money to go coach at Notre Dame for baseball, his alum, than maybe what his next contract is in the MLB. Like the money is not too far off. And Jim Schlossnagle, I think, is making $4 or $5 or $6 million a year to coach at Texas, and he pretty much just has to recruit every once in a while. The recruits are brought to him. He picks who he wants, and they come to him, and then show up on game days, like during practices and stuff. He's got assistants that do all the work. But I think it's a less stressful job. It's obviously less games. It's a third the amount of games that they play in the major leagues. And if you find the right school, you get treated like royalty. If the Floridas of the world, the LSU, the Texas, even Notre Dame's, like these baseball teams, Florida State's another one. These teams, you get treated like royalty on campus. So I think, like, sure, I could see a Tony Vitello getting some interest to go coach the Marlins or somebody and try to put some fire under their young team. But I would almost say that it's more intriguing for a major league manager to go down to the college level and pick the guys that they want on their team. They don't get that choice in the major leagues, and they also get just as much money. And if I don't know, like I think there's just more intriguing parts to coach college nowadays than there used to be.
So as we look forward to the 2025 season, of course, the biggest honor for an individual player would be that Golden Spikes Award. You mentioned Jay Laviolette going away the favorite, I'm assuming, in your eyes, but is there somebody else that potentially could steal that crown come the end of the season?
Well, I will tell you this. I don't know if Jason Lot. I don't know if he. I'm not going to say his last name. I have the yip saying it. My mouth doesn't work like that. I don't know if he's going to win it or at least get votes. His team is so talented
Mm.
that it's almost like he's splitting vote. He could be splitting votes with other players on his team.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple names out there that I really like. So, like for example, Charlie Condon last year, best player on Georgia. He made the team so much better. His numbers were crazy, and without him, I mean, they obviously had good pieces too, but no like first round draft picks on that team other than him. So it's like typically those type of players that win the Golden Spikes. Here's another good example. I was roommates with a Golden Spikes winner. So me and Kyle Lewis were roommates together at Mercer,
Oh,
played
wow.
on the
Wow.
same team, and he was the best player in their conference by far. And everybody knew about him. And they still like anytime they pitched to him, he had like 100 walks that year, but anytime he pitched to him, like he was just so much better than the rest of the league that he put up crazy numbers. I think you could look at a guy like Tanner Thatch from UNCW, which I talked about earlier. Like he's in a smaller conference and best player in his conference, I think, by far. Somebody that could put up just crazy numbers and win it. Here's another name, Drew Burris from Georgia Tech.
Hmm.
He's Georgia Tech's best player by far and was one of the top high school recruits going into his freshman year. He foregoes the draft because he wants to go play at Georgia Tech. Puts up crazy numbers as a true freshman. He got better this offseason, bigger, stronger, faster, starting to grow into his body a little bit. He's somebody that I think in playing in that Georgia Tech ballpark that's tiny and the wind blows out, man, he could be somebody that could win the Golden Spikes this year. And he also he kind of has the Tommy White flair about him. He wears the chains and he looks the part, long hair, plays center field. Like you just look at him and you're like, he's the best player on the field every time he steps on the field. So those are a couple names that I think at least I would put more of a chance to win the Golden Spikes than Jace Laviolette. Jace
There you go. That was
Laviolette.
good.
There you go. Got it.
Because he plays on such a talented team.
So Ben, we so appreciate you coming on here. I want to give you this time to hype up all the other stuff you have going on, anything you want to get out there for everybody and where they can find you. Of course, we said at the jump, and we will continue to hype up all the great stuff you're doing at 11.7.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly on Twitter. Like I'm kind of an old body that stays on Twitter and refreshes it every once in a while. But yeah, I'm obsessed with the game of baseball. It's not just college baseball, Major League Baseball too. So that's why I was, really happy that you guys reached out because I'll have something to do this summer and keep up with you guys and your Major League Baseball coverage there. But I mean, we have a Twitter account, we have a website. It's just you can search 11.7. It's like 11point7. And we do a majority of our work on Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. Like that's pretty much it. But yeah, I mean, nothing really to plug. Like this was fun. I loved hanging out with you guys.
Well, hopefully, like you mentioned at the top of the show, maybe this becomes a spot we can have you on every once in a while during the college season to give us a little insight there. And I'll get you out on here on this because you mentioned being an MLB fan as well. So give us your prediction, your honest prediction for the Astros this year.
I think I mean, this is so cliche and like maybe the news might be out right now, but it really depends on Alex Bregman. I think he is such a good locker room guy. And I've got the pleasure to meet with him in person, talk with him. I sat in a suite with him at the 2022 Texas Bowl, LSU versus Kansas State. And we got to know each other a good bit. He wants to be in Houston. He fits the team so well. And as Jose Altuve has said, he is somebody that controls the locker room and he has the culture about him. If they sign him, I think it's playoffs, no doubt. Hopefully get back to the ALCS. I love the pitching staff that they have, just loaded with young talent. They don't sign him. I'm probably I'm saying like, I don't even know if they make the playoff. Like they might make the playoffs, but to fill Alex Bregman's shoes is way bigger than what the stats say. I think he does a lot more for that team.
I
But
know I saw today that Dana Brown was kind of talking about him in the past tense, which, put some alarm bells off for Houston fans. But I mean, he and Pete Alonso, my guy, as a Met fan, they've got to sign sometime soon, whether it be with their former clubs or somewhere else. We're just counting the days here till spring training.
yeah, they'll both be Blue Jays probably somehow. Like
God.
it's gonna break me too, but I don't know. I know Bregman wants to be in Houston. I did see the Dana Brown clip where he was talking in past tense, but he's a smart guy. Maybe he knows what he's doing. And maybe Scott Boras will be, oh, well, you know what? We'll take the deal. Like, it's still the best offer we have. We'll take it. So, no.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting to me. And I feel like some of these players overplay their hands. We've seen it and you kind of have to cash in. We watched Alonso's original deal that was on the table. That was the best one he got. And he's never going to look at that money again. But, maybe this is the type of stuff you sign a earn it deal and you 1 year and you get back to the market and you say, prove it again. So it just sucks for Alonso. Everything fell in the wrong spot. He had a down year the year before. But for Bregman, dude, like there's a lot of intangible you can't quantify in the field. I agree. I'm a feels guy sometimes, and you feel it on the field. This guy is a clubhouse guy. He feels like the leader when he's out there. So he'd be a big loss for the Astros.
Yeah, I know, but golly, now you guys have me in my Astros feels right now. I was hoping to not do this, but I definitely want to come back on the show like around the trade deadline. That would be fun. I want to do a little trade deadline. I'm obsessed with the trade deadline, like because college baseball is over with, the draft is over with, so I have nothing else to like focus on. So I come up with just hypothetical trades and send it in my group messages with my buddies. I'm like, hey, what if they send this and this to here? Like, think we could get him?
Let's do it.
So you guys make sure you guys follow Ben on Twitter at Ben_Upton. And again, check out the podcast 11.7 and support everything they're doing over there for college baseball and all the coverage. Ben, it's been so great having you on. We'll have you on soon. All right, man.
Sounds good. No, I appreciate it, guys. This was fun.
All right, again, we want to thank Ben Upton for joining us here, talking all things college baseball. And as advertised, I feel more informed about what's going on with NCAA.
Yeah, I can see why they have the big following that they do. And again, we say this about a lot of our guests. Again, we've been very lucky with who we've had on here. But again, you feel like you could have gone another hour there with Ben if we really wanted to dig deep into some things. But that's a great primer right before the season's starting. I like that a lot.
Oh, yeah, and I already have ESPN Plus for the NHL content, so just digging in there and checking out those college baseball games. He had me at the midnight Hawaii games, and I understand I'm waking up early now, but dude, just watching a Hawaii game middle of the summer at midnight after the 10 o'clock games are over, dude, that sounds like a blessing.
Oh, I could picture you watching that. I know you're probably keeping track of the Caribbean series right now, like finger on the pulse.
Dude, of course. I'm watching all that stuff. Like, I can't get enough. I honestly am like, I'm desperate, so thirsty for baseball right now. So any content, I'm out there and checking it out. And spring training doesn't scratch that itch. Like when you first get pitchers and catchers, it feels good in the moment. But then when those games kick off, it's such a tease because it means nothing. I just want the regular season to start.
Yeah, it means nothing. And then the games start and it's like the spring training games, the guys you want to see are out there for like a half an inning. And then you like go to commercial, you come back and it's like number 68 and number 83 are out there, like football wide receivers and tight ends. You're like, who the hell am I watching? So yeah, you're right. It's exciting at first. And then you're like, all right, let's just get to the regular season, please.
Exactly. And this is a wrap on episode 59. We'll be back with episode 60 next week, which would be amazing. We don't know if we have guests or not because Devin's working hard to get some guests on here, maybe a double drop. Who knows as far as who we have down the pipeline. I know Devin has been working hard getting some guests in this offseason, and honestly, one guest better than the other. And I'm hoping we get a repeat soon because like we're saying, there's a couple of these people that we've had on. Love to get an update on what they're doing. And I really am serious about wanting Ben on, just to even give us not a full episode, but maybe a quick update if you can dedicate the time to just tell us what's going on with the college season during, when you and I are knee deep in the MLB season.
Oh yeah, once a month or even once every couple months, come on and give us a 10-15 minute spot about the biggest happenings. I think that would be awesome. And that sounds like a great idea to me.
So Dev, we have an update too about some of the good stuff we have on here. We've been working hard to get some sponsors and for some people supporting the podcast. If you want to drop some of that news.
Yeah, so our first affiliate program, we're part of Dugout Mugs now, which I know some other baseball podcasts work with them as well. So we're eventually going to put a link up on our X page, probably an Instagram story or in the bios as well to make it simple. And, they have lots of great stuff over there. They've become pretty popular over the last couple of years. I know, Steve, you said you have, I think, something that was a groomsman gift, right, for a wedding that you were a part of. So they make great stuff. You can get personalized things as well. And it's
over there.
You see, it's not just the mugs anymore too. Like I'm scrolling through there. One of the things that caught my eye was there's these like baseball bottle openers that look pretty cool. So they have lots of good stuff on there. We'll post a little bit about it. But if you use our link, if you're fans of ours and you're listening to our stuff and you want to help us out a little bit, they're our first affiliate. Hopefully we get some more, but go ahead and use our link. If you're looking for a gift for a big baseball fan as the season comes close, or maybe you're looking for a Valentine's Day gift next week and you have a baseball fan in your life, or weddings coming up and you're looking for some kind of gift there for groomsmen or something, they have lots of stuff that covers all that. So check us out. We'll get that information up there and every once in a while post about it as a reminder.
Absolutely. It's definitely exciting news, and we've been working hard to get our name out there. And like we said, we're approaching episode 60. not even a year in. We're approaching our second full season of baseball coverage, and we appreciate all the guests we've had on. We appreciate everyone that's listened to us, even for one episode or a few. Just thanks for joining us for the journey. It's been a lot of fun, and Devin and I every week feel like we're getting a little better at this, and getting the feedback feels nice, whether it's the reviews from you guys, the 5-star reviews, or just informal conversation about covering baseball with a passion. Because this is what it started as. Devin and I just want to cover baseball and talk baseball on here because people in our life didn't want to hear us continue to talk about it all season long. So this was an outlet for the two of us.
No doubt about it, man. I think it's a good release. Get all that baseball information out of our heads and all the thoughts that are running through our minds about random baseball stuff. We can actually talk about it.
So again, make sure you guys follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Table Setters Pod. Make sure you guys check it out. Devin run on the Twitter machine over there. All the great content. I'll be posting a reel from the episode with Ben over there. Make sure you guys retweet and follow us over there and get us to 2,000. We're at like 1.5, 1.6. We want to be up to 2,000 by maybe the start of the season. That's a goal to have. But we'll be back next week talking all things Major League Baseball. Maybe Pete Alonso will sign. Maybe Alex Bregman will sign. Maybe we'll have some more news to cover. But until then, we'll talk to you after a while.